Thank you, Jess. My name's Clifford. I'm an addict. Thank you, Tony. I sometimes forget to thank the person that asked me to be of service. It's not my favourite bit of service, but I do it when asked. I have been of continuous service for this fellowship since I got here, which is probably part of the reason why I'm still here. I've been really, really reflective today in particular, because I'm 6 years today to the date, and Tony booked me in, and it was like a God moment, and we looked at the date, and it was on my actual 6 years, and he booked me in, and I said, of course, I'll come to be of service. And I've been reflecting on the shift that has happened in that 6 years, because when I came here, it was all about like what my body and what my mind was craving, which was drugs. That's what it was really all about. That's why I ended up here, and alcohol. And the difference is now it's about sort of like what my heart and my spirit desire. And you know, I spent many years trying to really regulate and control the getting and the using of the drugs, steamrolling whoever to get what I wanted and needed. And the shift is today what my spirit and my heart needs. I just need to put that out there, put my intentions out there, and just leave the rest to God, kind of thing. That's the difference. That's what's happened in 6 years. And of course, as well, there's been a big shift in the calamity of my life and the serenity that I have today, somewhat, majority of the time, because of working these steps, applying these principles into my life. And I shared on Monday at my home group, and I think Sarah's the only one in here, so apologies, Sarah. You know, I don't usually have like a share, but I guess there's parts of my story that are just my story. Because I think about the earliest recollection, and I think about my childhood and the stuff that I was exposed to, and there was lots of reasons over the years that I blamed for my drinking and using. There were stints of foster care, abandonment, neglect. There was alcoholism, my mum's mental health, all of that jazz. That probably put like a child under a lot of pressure. And I was in a lot of fear, a constant state of fear. My back was against the wall, and I was just constantly thinking something bad was going to happen. And what I quickly come to realize is that before I ever took a drink or a drug, I suffered with this maladjusted spirit from a very young age. That's just been a part of my makeup from a very young age, before I took drink and drugs. And actually, then I discovered cannabis, and I was able to change the way that I feel. I found out quite quickly that I could change the way that I feel. And I really became addicted to doing that, because I just could not cope with my feelings in this life. And quite a significant period of like my adolescence, I guess it was when my mum died. She suffered from this illness, and she died indirectly in a fire. And despite the ominous warnings that I had from her lifestyle and the calamity of her life and the chaos of her life, that didn't deter me from then, you know, using for 24 years. But that grief at that time, because I felt a couple of things. I felt relieved, really, that her chaos had come to an end. And I also felt this huge resentment that she had sort of left me at quite a poignant stage of my life. And I just was unable to cope with that grief. And, you know, I guess those periods I just used like everyone else, but I was on a warpath, and I was truant in school, and I was bereft when I got to 16, and they said, oh, you can't sit your mock exams. I hadn't been there for 2 years, do you know what I mean? And I just remember that even at that age, at 16, I was just like determined. I was just running on all this self-will, like this, like I know best and I will do what I want to do. And really, I went on to have a lot of responsibility and a job and a career. But in the background was this disease. It was just looming. And somewhere along that process of my using, I'd crossed the line, and I haven't really been able to establish when that is or when that was, but it happened. And I guess the downfall that I could identify is when I met my drug of no choice, which was cocaine, and it was like a match made in heaven, but also like the worst day of my life. I don't know if that's even, if I can even, I don't know if you even understand what I mean, but like at that moment, I was the most joyous I've ever felt until the very next morning, and then I realized what I realized about the four horsemen, and that terror and that frustration, that bewilderment, that despair. And despite those feelings, I went on to do that for another 10 years, and I ended up really just hurting a lot of people, not being able to keep relationships, not being able to really form any real friendships other than sort of fair weather friends, and I collected a load of those. And when my dad died, that was another poignant moment. I kind of just spiraled, and there was many people around me that were probably gravely concerned for me. And maybe the problem was obvious to them, but the only real problem that I could identify is that the drugs and the drink kept running out, and I just thought, if we can somehow regulate this supply and demand problem, there wouldn't really be a problem. That was my real honest analysis of the situation I was in. Despite not paying my mortgage and the bank trying to repossess the house, and I remember praying to God, please God, let me come out on top. Let me sell this house before the bank repossessed it. And lo and behold, my prayers came true, and there I was with like now quite a considerable amount of money in the bank and a ferocious cocaine habit, and way too much time on my hands. And like any respectful cocaine addict, I went seeking the best cocaine around the world, looking for all sorts, and I found myself in some really, really dark and dingy, sordid places, because that was my favourite type of using, really. Dark, dingy, sordid, perverse. That was my favourite using. And I put myself in some really, really, really high-risk situations over the years in countries that you don't want to be banged up, and some real near-death situations as well. What I now know is that I put myself in lots of positions to be harmed, and I kind of came out of these situations mostly unscathed. But when I did come out of these situations, I used to say to myself, ain't I lucky? Do you know what I mean? That I got out of that. Like, I've come out of that unscathed. And I look back now, and I kind of look at those situations as not a coincidence, but really evidence that there was always a power sort of working in my life. I was always safe and protected, but I was completely blocked off with the substances. And ultimately, my using wound up me alone in another country, not wanting to live, but not having the balls to kill myself. But if I didn't wake up, that was okay. That was where I was at. And one girl that what I now know, she worked her 12-step on me. I didn't know anything what she was doing at the time, but she was working her 12-step on me, and she come to see me in Spain, and she used just like me. I've known her for years, and she had got clean in another fellowship, and she dropped me some leaflets unbeknownst to me, there was meetings going on around me. I had no clue. And she said to me, "We're waiting for you to come home." I'll always remember that. And I said I just was like looking at her like, "What are you talking about?" Do you know what I mean? I had no clue, or I just didn't even know that people got clean. I was dumbfounded how she was clean, because she just used just like me. And I was just full of this false sense of pride, because I didn't want to return back to the UK, because I'd spunked all that money. I had not a lot to show for it, but I knew also that I was not going to end up in a good place had I remained. And I can only describe it really as a divine intervention, because for some reason I ended up back in the UK, and I started this process of engagement. And how that came about, again, it wasn't me. It was merely like a window of opportunity, the really smallest window, and a seed of willingness that kind of just merged together. And this period of engagement came, and they said to me, "Oh, do you want to go to rehab?" And I thought, "Oh, brilliant." I was like, I will curb the cocaine and the drinking, and I'll do this rehab, and they'll give me a flat, because I've done so well. That was my real plan. My real desire was that I had a motive to get clean, and that was because I was homeless. I was homeless and toothless. That's what I was by the end of it. And I came to Bournemouth on the 9th of July 2019, so that was 6 years ago yesterday. And I rocked up, and I definitely wasn't clean. And I was scared. That's what I was. I was so terrified of what was to come. I didn't know what was ahead. And I got introduced to fellowship, and I went to my first CA meeting, and it was absolutely horrendous. It was about 100, in my mind, it was about 100 people there, and someone was sitting where I'm sitting, and they were banging on the table, and they were saying, "If you want what we've got, you do what we do." And my reaction was, "Keep it, I don't want it. Whatever it is, you guys can keep that. That's not a bit of me." But I just feel really, really blessed that in a much more intimate setting of that treatment centre, these men came in and they carried the message to me through hospitals and institutions. The message was so basic and so simple. I was sick as hell in there. I'm like off having SRs. I'm like sick as a dog, can't get honest. I'm stripped away from the drinking and drugs, but I'm just full of the same amount of power that I had when I walked in there, which was none. And they carried a simple message. They said to me that if I just get a sponsor and a home group, and if I work the steps, and if I do service at that home group and give this away to someone else, I never have to drink and use again. That's what they told me. And that's what I heard. And that's what I hung on to. And even 6 years on, my life is so full right now. I've got a really fulfilling job, a home, friends that I care about, and sometimes I forget where I've come from. Do you know what I mean? And when I have to strip it back to the basics, I just keep it as simple as that, because I still have a sponsor that I make contact with. They know that I'm sponsored by them, which is a good start. I still have a home group. I still do service for this fellowship. I still work the steps. And when asked, I give it away. One of my biggest things that I've overcome is like my fear. I think my fear inventory was like the biggest here, and through the process of doing a couple of step fours, that's always been like a highlight of my inventory is the fear part of my inventory. And when I came here, I was hopeless. My faith was wavering, and I certainly wasn't brave enough to like sit here and speak in public. But somehow, just through the process of doing this spiritual path, that fear has subsided, but it's never gone away. It's always in the periphery. It's always there, just sort of hanging around, like that old saying, you know, the monkey's off my back, but the circus is always in town. That's kind of where I'm at, and my problems are not around drinking drugs anymore. And ultimately, what I learned is the drinking drugs was never really the problem. The problem was me. They were but a symptom of a deeper problem, and I had to come here and get down to causes and conditions. And that's what I've managed to do throughout the steps. And I wake up most mornings, no word of a lie, and I'm like, it's happened again, I'm clean. I'm absolutely baffled sometimes that I wake up clean, that I'm 6 years clean. That just blows my mind. And I've not at any given time thought that drinking drugs was a way out of any kind of emotional problem that I face today, because that's what my real problem is today, is like regulating my thoughts and my emotions. And I heard something actually earlier this week which really, really touched me, because there's people that came here before me, and that moment's silence that we have before the meeting, you know, it's a time for a little bit of reflection and prayer. And we're praying for the people that are still suffering, and we're praying for the people that are yet to come. And it dawned on me that I'm a result of that prayer that you guys made before I got here. And I just want to welcome anyone that's new to CA. It's the only place that you can come and get a round of applause and a hug for fucking your life up. But we'll show you how to get well, and we'll show you how we got well. And as a result of just sticking with us, you can change your life. I'm telling you, my life is completely different to 6 years ago. The way I look at life, the way I look at my fellow man, the way I look at the resentments I held, and all, you know, my part in all of that, and putting myself in a position to be harmed, is all clearer now, because I was just absolutely clouded, and I was absolutely blackened in the soul. And today I feel softer, and just really privileged to sit here and come and share with you guys. And I'm going to leave it there. My name's Clifford, I'm an addict. Thank you so much.